Welcome to the Canny Conversations podcast, Conversations with a Cause, with social entrepreneur Safaraz. Saf came relatively late to entrepreneurship after working in both the public and private sectors. He coined a phrase that describes what he does as the mad entrepreneur, that's make a difference entrepreneurship. As well as being the author of the Canny Bites books, Saf's business interests cover health and social care, business and corporate events, as well as him being the CEO of Pathway Group, a welfare to work and skills provider. In these podcasts, he shares his thoughts with journalist Adrian Kibler. So, let's join the conversation.
Welcome to Canny Conversations with Safaraz. My name is Adrian Kibler. This podcast aims to bring you a canny conversation with a cause. Conversations that we hope will captivate your curiosity cannily. Now, people that have been with us in earlier episodes will know that we've been talking about businesses and particularly the role of people within businesses and getting the right people. And of course, for any of you that haven't heard the earlier episodes, then there's an opportunity to catch up at your convenience and take in the earlier podcasts. The ground that we're covering in this series is also covered in significant depth in Saf's Canny Bites books, and there are 3 of those. All right, today we're going to be talking about something a bit more, if you like, tactical. We've talked about some strategic issues up to now, but now we're going to be talking about the mechanics of the process of finding a new person, recruiting them. And what I want to do, Saf, is ask you to talk me through the process. Somebody in your team has left or is leaving and you want to replace them. So let's go into some detail in the process that you go through and what are some of the pitfalls that people can fall into. Okay, I'm in your team. I've been noticing. Where do you go from there?
I think the first thing that you realise is that when somebody decides to leave, that decision wasn't then and there. It's been a decision that they've been probably looking at for a while. We automatically don't think we're going to leave one day and then the next day we're not out of the door. So it's a period of time, and in some cases that could be months, it could be years. Often it's not an overnight decision. Something there has been ticking along and there's been issues rumbling in the background, and people leave generally not on a positive basis but for something negative. Most people don't leave a job or a career or an organisation to progress onto with another organisation, but it's there's a negative factor there, and that negative factor is a bit of a pain. Whatever it is, that tends to be a stronger driving force, more emotional driving force than positivity of a career move with an organisation. In most cases, people regard the better. There's a saying: "Is it better the devil you know than the devil you don't?" So generally, that's the case with regard to the making the decision in terms of leaving an organisation. You may have also come across the saying that people don't leave businesses, they leave managers. That could be the case. The fact that somebody leaves because of the environment that they're in, some change that's happened in terms of teams, managers, factors such as those as well. Sometimes the person who's looking to leave may be still prepared to stay. So we've had the situations where we've offered position to somebody and they've had a counter offer from their existing employer, from their existing manager or leader, and then they decide the fact that they'll stay. So that often happens as well. And there's many reasons why somebody might leave, but there's also many reasons why somebody then will stay in the existing role and not decide to leave as well. So it's a topic I think is on most businesses' minds.
Do you think it would be fair to say that when somebody does decide to leave, it rarely comes as a complete surprise then? Is that what you're saying?
In some cases, yeah, it's not a surprise. In other cases, because it's not been discussed, there's not been a conversation, it could be a shock. the employer then realizes, the business then realizes that this is something which they weren't expecting, and there's an element of for shock and a surprise, and then it's a matter of doing all you can to try and retain the existing member of your team. I've seen situations, I've heard of situations where there's an element of emotional blackmail, if I can use it, or emotional pressure for the employee to stay. We need you for X, Y, Z reasons. How long have you known each other, and so forth, and all those personal tugs for that individuals to stay. And all of these are fairly common. And I think in some cases, yes, you are right. It's not a surprise, but I would say majority of the time, it's not something that's been discussed. And when it comes out of the blue, then it is a surprise for the employers.
And of course, businesses invest an awful lot of time and effort in the recruitment process, and losing somebody, is very significant in terms of losing some skills, in terms of losing the investment that you've made in training that person. And in the third Canny Bites book, you talk in considerable depth about the importance of retaining staff and keeping them on board. But let's say, whatever the reason is, you've got to fill a new post because somebody's left. Let's sort of drill down into the process, and let's start with the job description, because that can influence, can't it, enormously whether people decide to apply or not. So tell me something about your views in terms of how a job description and a job advert should be written.
I think the two things are quite different in terms of what a job description is and what an advertisement is, and also something called a person specification as well, in terms of the behaviours, the skill sets that are looking at, and all of those things have got a unique way. All those things are individual. Organisations sometimes do take time to craft specifications, draft the job descriptions, and so forth. In many cases, what I find is that the more time and effort that you spend in terms of actually crafting what that looks like, the better to differentiate, not only in terms of yourself as an organisation, but also speak to the prospective employee. And I think that's the key. It's about communicating to the prospective member of your team, this is what we're seeking, this is the type of person, the behaviours, the knowledge, the skills. And I think it's being able to transfer that across to them, where the job advert, the job description really resonates, and they're able to understand exactly what that means. The more detail you give, the better it is. Our view on that is that we also now produce a briefing document, particularly for manager roles, where they're managing contracts. Within that, we actually give them information with regard to the contract itself that they're dealing with, what that entails, what's involved. We actually share with them the organisation chart, the staff that they have, the responsibilities that they've been managing. We share with them the constraints that we have, the strengths, the opportunities, some of our challenges. We share all of that information with them, so they're coming in with their eyes open. It's not just a matter of you applying with us, but we're also sharing with them warts and all, what that job is, what that role requires, and get them to start relaying to us why they're the right person for the job. So there's a selection criteria that we go through, which isn't just about an advert, but it's much more, giving them much more information.
But in terms of the advert or the job posting, I mean, I know that you've talked in the past to me about how important the use of language can be in the respect that certain words perhaps would put off certain people. Perhaps there are words which are perhaps more masculine in an advertisement that might put women off. That's drilling down into a lot of detail, but just tell me a bit more about that, the phrases that you use and the language that you use in order to encourage as wide a variety of people to apply.
I think one of the things is that we've realised, and the sector itself has realised that there are certain words that attract certain types of people. So when you're talking about personal traits, characteristics, then that tends to be more appealing to males. If you're talking about ambitious, some more sort of behaviour characteristics, that tends to sort of appeal more to males. When you're talking about knowledge and skills and more factual stuff, which is, have you got this level of experience, this level of knowledge, then that appeals either to both parties, but it's more females as well, where they can actually say, yes, I've got this, this is what I entail, as opposed to more in terms of the drive, the ambition, the get up and go type of characteristics. I think that generally is recognised within the industry in terms of the importance of how the jobs are written to ensure the fact that you can attract a wide pool of people to apply for those. In some cases, even the job title itself can be quite off-putting in terms of how it's written. So it's all of these things make an impact, make a difference in terms of who you would attract to for that position.
It's a very good point that you make, and of course, if you don't get the language right, then albeit unintentionally, you can be significantly influencing the response that you get for the posting of the advert. In the modern world, there are so many different places that you can advertise jobs. I mean, the days when you'd put the advert in the local newspaper and that would be about it have all gone. There are so many other jobs platforms that you can use. I mean, what platforms do you use when you're recruiting? Where do you post the job?
I think mostly at this point in time, I would say the job boards that are out there cover most of our needs. Quite a few of these job boards also syndicate these jobs into other newspapers or online platforms as well. So the market leaders is Indeed. So Indeed is probably the number one jobs board out there. You've got CV Library, Total Jobs, Monster, Reed. That would probably be majority of the marketplace for recruitment. These are boards where you can also search CVs, but predominantly you can advertise your vacancies on those boards. And then I would say, if you've got a bit of an employer brand, some following, also onto your promote the job onto your social media. And then you can also look at recruitment agencies, particularly if they're well known within your sector as well. And that would probably be a diverse range of activities which would get you the most possible results. And not forgetting the fact that you can market through your own staff internally, get them to promote as well. And I think you want to be in a position where you've got a wide range of promotion out there, particularly for key vacancies, to try and attract the best that you can.
What just tell me what role you think that employment consultancies, recruitment consultancies have in this, headhunters. Do you think that they can add significantly to the process, or is it something that you would not tend to use?
I mean, we do use recruitment agencies. What we find is that not every prospective employee will put their job out onto a job board or will apply directly. Quite a few will go to a recruitment agency. So if somebody's dissatisfied with their current role, one of the first things that they might do is maybe go to a recruiter to discuss what's out there in the marketplace. And I think if you're not that way inclined, you're going to be missing out on that particular talent as well. So we look at it as a whole. So even though we like to recruit as much as we can, obviously internally, to not to save on cost, but we also realise that we want to attract the best possible candidates as well. So we're very open to using recruitment agencies and just being more open to the fact that you want to get as many people who are the right type of people applying for your position as well, to try and get the best outcome.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, do you think that, generally speaking, from your experience, and of course, it will differ. But where you have decided to use a recruitment consultancy, do you generally find that if you do that, you generally recruit someone that they put to you, or would you off? There must be times when you use a consultancy but still decide to recruit somebody you've come across in another way.
I think one of the benefits of using a recruitment agency is you get another perspective from the recruiter. The recruiter has spent some time with the individual. They discuss certain things that are not necessarily on the CV, the reasons for applying, maybe some of the issues that they have presently with their work, maybe some concerns that they have, and those things you may not pick up, and you won't pick up until you meet the person. So you've got another insight, and that insight is often very valuable in terms of understanding the person. And what you also find is that you're buying in the expertise that the recruiter has, and the recruiter knows that they've got to be, they've got to add value, and I think that's the key. And for ourselves, yes, we will go out and recruit ourselves. We will put an advert out on Indeed, CV Library. We would put it out in terms of our local, on our internet. We'll talk to our team, but we'll also talk to recruiters as well, just to get that added exposure and try and get the best opportunity to recruit the best person for the role.
Let's talk about the next stage that we've got to. You've got a short list. You've prepared a short list of people. I mean, I know it will vary, but roughly, what do you think? What number of people do you think constitutes a good short list? And tell me something about the interview process. What sort of style of interview you would hold, where you'd hold them, how many people might you involve? So let's start off with the shortlist. I mean, typically, what's a good shortlist for you?
I think that does vary. That does vary. For us, I think getting the right balance is key. You could be in a position where you've got too many people or too few people. In terms of recent examples, we've had 3 people shortlists, but we've probably had 100 individuals who've applied. And then it's a case of a process of elimination first as a way of filtering. And then there's an element of selection afterwards. So you start off eliminating as many as you can, filtering down to a select few. And then from there onwards, you're looking at possibly having conversations. That conversation could be 10 people or thereabouts. And, that could be a first stage process. And then really from there, we have a 3-stage for our managers process. So there's a first stage telephone conversation type interview. Then there's a panel presentation that we ask them to come in. And then after that, there's a 3rd stage conversation interview as well. What we found, talking to about 3 to 4 people is just about right in terms of, the selection criteria, because we're asking them in many cases to go away and prepare a presentation, particularly when we're recruiting managers who are contract managers or managers of an academy or a division. Then we're presenting them with information and getting them to do a mini business plan or a proposal, and that will obviously entail them spending time, but it's also time on our behalf. And then we've got 2 or 3 people at least who are sitting in on the panel. Then that's a fair amount of our investment as well. So I think getting that is right. I've never, if there's not enough candidates, then I think you've got to go out back to the marketplace, because you have to have, I believe, something to compare to. Otherwise, you can make the mistake of, going and saying it's right when you've got nothing really to compare with. And I think that comparison is absolutely right and valid.
You raised a really interesting point there. Some years ago, I was involved with an executive recruitment consultancy, a headhunting group, and they said, Adrian, just remember, until the very last stages, this is an elimination process. It's not a selection process. I was told, always wear a white shirt and a blue tie because nobody takes objection to that. And it's, if you can get through the early stages, then you can get to the point where they actually start selecting. How many interviews would you normally expect to have for a senior position?
Interviews in terms of people?
No, sorry, Isaf, in terms of, a first interview, a second interview, a third interview. I mean, some of these processes seem to go on forever. I mean, would you normally expect to make a decision after the first interview, or would you want more than that?
No, ours is a very structured process, particularly with regard to managers. When we're recruiting somebody who's a manager, contract manager, then we manage their expectations by saying to them the fact that it's a 3-stage process: a telephone interview, there's a presentation, and then there's a interview at the end, which is after the event and more about discussing a way forward. The presentation for us is the key, because that's when they're talking and presenting with regard to the organisation, objectives, and really their business plan. We see exactly what they can deliver. The first one is a bit more about where they are presently, what their drivers are, a little bit about their experiences, their knowledge, much more with regard to where they are in the journey, and also at that time sharing with them in terms of where we are and what our obstacles are. If they're interested, and we advise them that the process will require them to do a presentation, then we give them the briefing document. That briefing document could be 15 pages worth of information, which has got data, stats, numbers, organogram, various things where they're actually studying what that role is, what the constraints are, what the opportunities are, thinking about the job, and coming in and doing at least an hour presentation with half an hour minimum Q&A based on the presentation. So in that presentation for us, we're not necessarily talking about what they've done in the past or competency style interviews, or talking about situations and the whole star type interview, situations, tasks, those sort of things. It's more specifically relating to our business, where we are presently on our journey, what they need to be looking at, and how they're going to overcome that. That's what we tend to rely on. Can they do the job? Do they understand it? Are they able to convey how they're going to do it? That's key for us. And then after that, we have the third stage interview, which is really about a combination of the first and the second. And then this is where we get to know the person a little bit more and try and.
When somebody applies for a job with your business, do they send in a letter, a CV? Do they have to fill in a form? Because a lot of public sector bodies these days have got this process which a lot of people find very annoying, where you can't use a CV. You have to send in a form and you have to handwrite it and all the rest of it. And do you have a form, or do people send in a CV, or how does that work?
So we rely on a CV. So we work on their CV. We encourage people to send their CV across. After they've been offered a position, we get them to fill in a form to grab all their information and ensure the fact that they confirm that it's true and accurate and so forth. But the starting process, we work from their CV. We hope that they've tailored their CV as best as they can for the role, but we work from a CV. So that's our preference. But as you're right, a lot of the government type jobs, civil service, some of the blue collar, blue chip companies, they tend to sort of favour an application form, and then that's their structure. But as you said, it's what the employer feels right for them and what works for them.
How much score do you put by references? Do you, some people think, references, basically, you're not going to put somebody down as a reference if they're going to say something bad about you. And there are quite some significant legal issues. If someone, for example, is offered a job on condition of reference and then that job offer is withdrawn, legally they're entitled to see the reference that lost them the job. Do you ask for references, and do you put much score by them?
I think it's a condition of our employment that we ask for references. We work in a regulated environment. So, for example, education, public sector, we've got to meet certain criteria. So, for example, we will say this offer that we've given you is subject to a DBS check, disclosure barring service check, a CRB check, but it's also subject to references. And I think that they're key things. Again, our other business is health and social care. We've got to have a trail, and we've got to have we've got to be able to look at the last, say, 10 years. Again, foster care business as well. We've got to go into detail in terms of their reasons for leaving and look at those things. So it depends on your sector, depends on if you've got any regulatory constraints. But from our perspective, I think references are important. It's usually we collect the references after we've offered the position.
I mean, you put, you've talked about the various processes that you go through to try and make sure that the recruitment process is as fair and equitable as it can be. But particularly as people get a bit older, the biggest recruitment tool is probably word of mouth, or otherwise known as the old boys or the old girls network, and sometimes known as by cynics as cronyism. I mean, how do you feel about recruitment through, recruitment of people or people that are recommended to you? And is that cheating, or what do you think?
I think using the friends and family network is a positive thing, but it can't be the only thing to use. So from our perspective, it's a way of getting information across. In terms of your recruiting, you've got to recruit what you perceive, what you believe is the best person for the business, best person for the job. And I think that's the bottom line. As long as you've got the right intention, then I think it's not an issue in terms of how you get the message across. Our main objective is to let as many people know that there is a vacancy, get the information disseminated using social media, using LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, all of those things, as well as our current staff members, recruitment agencies, traditional job boards, as many people as we can. That's the key for us. And then after that, it's the obviously the process of elimination, the process of selection, and then really getting those conversations. But getting a diverse pool of people, I think, is absolutely key to try and find the best person for the role.
And finally, you've got your man or you've got your woman. In terms of drawing up the contract and the formal part of it, would you normally basically say this is a job and it's X amount per year and take it or leave it, or is the negotiation on the terms and conditions part and parcel of the interview, or is that something that comes when you've decided who you want and you try and nail that down at that point?
For us, it's in terms of the manager levels that I mentioned, in terms of the third stage of the process, that's where we start talking about salary in detail, our offer in detail. What we also find at that stage is that we've had individuals who've applied for a position where their expectation is slightly more than the banding that we've offered. So that sometimes can be a stumbling block in terms of the conversation. We may have a viewpoint that we want to offer maybe middle of the band. Their expectation is to be at the highest level of the band, and those conversations come right at the end. That's the stage where we tend to talk about salary and terms and conditions and so forth. What we found in the past is that each person has got a different perspective. So for some people, flexibility is important. Working from home and having the choice to work from home on particular days, that's more of a driver. In other cases, it's having company vehicle or expenses, or getting to understand pension schemes and benefits and health benefits and so forth. We try and, where possible, compromise and offer according to a sense of packages. So it's not one size fits all. particularly when you're talking and recruiting at a higher level, I think there's an element where you expect negotiation. We wouldn't necessarily do that at sort of junior positions. It's a salary. This is the base, and often we wouldn't expect to start negotiating with somebody at those levels. But definitely higher levels. There is a lot of negotiation, a lot of understanding in terms of what are the key drivers for that person. But by that time, in terms of the third stage, you've already got an idea of where this is going and where the middle ground is and what would work for both parties.
It's a very big subject, and one we could talk about for a long time. But unfortunately, we haven't got any more time. But this topic is covered in Saf's book, the third book. Now comes the time to curtail our canny conversation with a cause. Thanks for listening, and catch up at your convenience.
Thanks for listening to this Canny Conversation with a Cause. These conversations are based upon the Canny Bites books by Safaraz Ali, available on Amazon. To find out more, go online and visit Saf's website, pathwaygroup.co.uk, or join him on social media. He can be contacted at safaraz@pathwaygroup.co.uk.